We live in a world that celebrates success yet quietly suffers from emptiness. We chase promotions, titles, and growth charts, but too many people wake up every morning exhausted, disengaged, and disconnected. We tell ourselves this is the price of ambition, the cost of progress. But what if that story is wrong? What if people aren't burned out because they work too hard, but because the systems they work in have forgotten why they exist? What if people don't quit jobs at all, but quit environments that slowly drain their humanity? This is the tension of our time. We have more power, more technology, and more opportunity than any generation before us, yet trust is collapsing, loyalty is eroding, and fulfillment feels increasingly out of reach. We measure success with precision, but meaning remains elusive. We optimize for efficiency while ignoring purpose. And in doing so, we confuse movement with progress and results with impact. At the heart of this problem is a simple but uncomfortable truth. When people do not feel safe, seen, or valued, performance becomes survival. Fear replaces trust. Compliance replaces commitment. Short-term wins replace long-term strength. In these environments, people do what they must to protect themselves, not what they could do to help one another thrive. Burnout is not a personal failure. Disengagement is not laziness. They are signals. They are symptoms of environments built without intention, led without empathy, and driven by metrics that reward outcomes but ignore human cost. When leaders focus only on what they do and how fast they do it and forget why they do it, people become expendable. And when people feel expendable, they eventually leave physically, emotionally, or morally. This is not just a workplace. It is a societal one. Systems without purpose create inequality. Leadership without service breeds mistrust. Cultures driven by fear may produce short-term results, but they hollow out the very people who sustain them. Over time, these systems weaken organizations, fracture communities, and erode the social fabric that holds us together. Great leadership has never been about being in charge. It has always been about taking responsibility for those in our care. The most resilient organizations are not the ones with the smartest strategies, but the ones where people feel safe enough to speak honestly, challenge ideas, and show up fully as human beings. Trust is not a soft ideal. It is a biological and strategic necessity. It is what allows people to cooperate, innovate, and endure uncertainty together. This is where hope begins. Because environments are designed by people, and what has been designed can be redesigned. When individuals reconnect with their why, their deeper purpose beyond money or status, they begin to act with clarity and courage. When leaders choose empathy over control and integrity over convenience, cultures change. When organizations commit to long-term thinking instead of short-term gain, they build something sustainable, something worthy of loyalty. The responsibility is shared. It belongs to leaders who must ask, not just how to get more from people, but how to better serve them. It belongs to individuals who must demand meaning, not just compensation, and contribute with intention, not resignation. And it belongs to communities that must decide whether success will be defined by accumulation or by contribution. The environments we create today determine the kind of future we inherit tomorrow. If we build places where people feel protected rather than threatened, inspired rather than used, we unlock a level of performance and fulfillment that no incentive system can buy. People will not need to be motivated. They will be aligned. And aligned people do extraordinary things. So the call to action is simple, but not easy. Start with why. In every decision, ask who this truly serves. Choose courage over fear, trust over control, and long-term impact over short-term applause. Commit to becoming the kind of leader at work, at home, and in society who serves something bigger than themselves. Because when we create environments worthy of our humanity, people don't just stay, they grow, they contribute. And together they build a future that actually means something. People don't quit jobs, they quit environments that lack trust, safety, and meaning. This distinction matters because it shifts responsibility away from individuals and back onto the systems and cultures they operate within. Most people do not wake up wanting to fail, disengage, or give the bare minimum. They start with energy, hope, and a desire to contribute. What erodes the motivation over time is not the work itself, but the atmosphere surrounding it, the unspoken rules, the behaviors that are rewarded, and the absence of human care embedded into daily operation. When trust is missing, people spend more time protecting themselves than performing at their best. They hesitate to speak honestly, avoid taking risks, and learn quickly that silence is safer than truth. In these environments, mistakes are punished rather than learned from, and vulnerability is interpreted as weakness. Over time, people stop bringing their full self to work because doing so feels dangerous. Innovation slows, collaboration becomes transactional, and relationships are reduced to hierarchies rather than partnerships. Trust, once broken and never established, creates a constant undercurrent of anxiety that drains energy and focus. Psychological safety is not a luxury. It is a prerequisite for sustainable performance. When people feel safe, they are more willing to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and admit uncertainty. Without safety, even the most talented teams become rigid and defensive. Fear-based environments may still produce results, but those results come at a cost. People comply instead of commit. They follow instructions instead of exercising judgment. The organization may look successful from the outside while quietly losing its capacity to adapt and endure. Meaning is the final and often most neglected element. Human beings need to know that their efforts matter, that their work contributes to something beyond quarterly targets or personal survival. When leaders fail to articulate a clear sense of purpose, people fill the gap with their own assumptions, often cynical ones. Work becomes a series of tasks, disconnected from any larger impact. Over time, this creates emotional exhaustion, not because the work is hard, but because it feels empty. Meaningless effort is far more draining than meaningful struggle. Many organizations mistake perks, incentives, or compensation for culture. While these can attract people, they do not retain them when the environment is misaligned. A higher salary cannot compensate for daily stress caused by disrespect or indifference. Flexible hours cannot offset a lack of dignity. Recognition programs fall flat when people feel unseen by those in leadership. Culture is not what is written on the wall. It is what people experience when pressure is high and decisions are difficult. Leadership plays a defining role in shaping these environments. Leaders who prioritize numbers over people may achieve short-term gains, but they unintentionally signal that human well-being is secondary. Over time, this message becomes embedded in the system. Managers replicate what they see. Policies reinforce distance rather than care. People learn that they are valued for output, not for who they are or what they could become. In such conditions, leaving becomes an act of self-preservation, not disloyalty. Trust, safety, and meaning are built through consistent behavior, not slogans. They emerge when leaders listen without defensiveness, take responsibility for failures, and make decisions that reflect long-term concern for their people. They grow when success is shared and accountability is fair. They deepen when leaders are willing to serve rather than control. These qualities cannot be rushed, but their absence is felt immediately and profoundly. When environments are healthy, people stay even when the work is challenging. They endure setbacks because they feel supported. They push through uncertainty because they believe in the purpose. They forgive mistakes because trust has been established. In these cultures, loyalty is not demanded, it is earned. Performance becomes a byproduct of alignment rather than pressure. People contribute not because they are afraid to lose their jobs, but because they feel proud to be part of something that respects their humanity. The conversation then is not about how to retain talent, but how to design environments worthy of human commitment. Every policy, meeting, and leadership decision either strengthens or weakens trust. Every direction either increases safety or erodes it. Every explanation of why the work matters either reinforces meaning or leaves people searching for it elsewhere. People rarely quit suddenly. They disengage slowly. One compromised value at a time, one ignored voice at a time, one moment of disconnection that signals they no longer belong. Burnout and disengagement are systemic failures rooted in purposeless leadership, not personal weakness. For too long, individuals have been taught to internalize exhaustion as a flaw in their character rather than a warning sign from the environment they are operating in. When people feel drained, unmotivated, or disconnected, the common response is to encourage them to be more resilient, more disciplined, or more grateful. This narrative is convenient because it avoids a deeper examination of the systems that demand constant output while offering little meaning in return. Most people begin their work with good intentions. They want to contribute, to learn, and to feel that their efforts matter. Burnout does not appear overnight. It accumulates slowly as people are asked to give more without understanding why, to move faster without clarity, and to endure pressure without support. When leadership cannot articulate a clear sense of purpose, work becomes transactional. Tasks are completed to meet expectations, not to advance a shared mission. Over time, this erodes intrinsic motivation and replaces it with mere endurance. Disengagement often follows the same pattern. People stop caring not because they lack ambition, but because caring has proven costly. In environments where input is ignored, feedback is punished, or values are inconsistently applied, emotional withdrawal becomes a rational response. People learn that enthusiasm is risky and that initiative may go unrewarded or even criticized. The safest path becomes doing only what is required and nothing more. This is not laziness. It is adaptation to a system that does not protect or respect human effort. Purposeless leadership focuses heavily on metrics, efficiency, and short-term outcomes while neglecting the human experience behind the numbers. Leaders may believe they are being objective or pragmatic, yet their decisions communicate that people are means to an end, rather than contributors to a cause. When success is defined solely by results, individuals feel pressure without context. They are told what to do and how to do it, but rarely reminded why it matters. Without purpose, effort feels endless and sacrifice feels unrecognized. Fear often becomes the invisible driver in these systems. Deadlines, targets, and performance reviews are used to compel behavior rather than inspire commitment. While fear can generate activity, it cannot sustain engagement. It narrows thinking, discourages creativity, and accelerates emotional fatigue. People begin to operate in survival mode, conserving energy rather than investing it. Over time, this constant state of vigilance depletes even the most capable individuals. Leaders who misinterpret burnout as a personal failing respond with surface-level solutions. They offer time management workshops, wellness programs, or motivational slogans while leaving the underlying culture untouched. These interventions may provide temporary relief, but they do not address the root cause. Asking people to recover within the same conditions that exhausted them only reinforces the belief that their struggle is their own fault. This deepens disengagement and erodes trust. Purpose-driven leadership takes a fundamentally different approach. It recognizes that human beings are not machines, and that performance is deeply connected to meaning. Leaders who start with why create clarity around contribution and impact. They help people see how their work fits into a larger story. This context transforms effort from obligation into intention. People are more willing to endure difficulty when they understand what they are working toward and who they are working for. When purpose is present, accountability feels fair rather than oppressive. Feedback becomes guidance instead of judgment. Challenges are framed as shared problems rather than personal shortcomings. In these environments, energy is renewed through connection and trust. People feel seen, valued, and protected, which allows them to take risks and grow. Engagement becomes sustainable because it is rooted in belief rather than pressure. Burnout is not solved by asking individuals to care less, but by asking leaders to care more. It requires the courage to examine how priorities are set, how decisions are communicated, and how success is defined. When leadership aligns systems with purpose, disengagement diminishes because people no longer feel exploited by their own effort. They feel part of something that respects their time, their energy, and their humanity, and that sense of belonging restores the motivation that fear-based systems slowly strip away. Fear may drive short-term results, but it destroys loyalty, creativity, and long-term strength. This is one of the most persistent misconceptions in leadership, that pressure, intimidation, and control are effective tools for sustaining performance. In the immediate term, fear can compel compliance. Deadlines are met, rules are followed, and mistakes may be avoided. At first glance, it appears that fear produces results, and in some ways it does. But these results are brittle. They are fragile because they are not built on engagement, trust, or intrinsic motivation. They exist only while fear remains present. And as soon as pressure eases, performance falters, morale collapses, and talent begins to leave. Fear corrodes loyalty because it signals to people that their value is conditional and transactional. When leaders rely on fear, people internalize the idea that they are only as good as their last output, that they must constantly prove themselves to avoid punishment or criticism. Loyalty is never born in such conditions because loyalty is rooted in trust, in belief that someone has your back and values you as a human being rather than merely as a source of results. Under fear-based leadership, individuals may stay for necessity, for paycheck, or for obligation, but they do not stay with commitment or pride. They measure each interaction against risk and self-preservation, and their emotional investment is limited, shallow, and costly to the organization over time. Creativity suffers even more dramatically under fear. Innovation requires experimentation, risk-taking, and the willingness to make mistakes. Fear suppresses all of these behaviors because people learn that failure will be punished rather than seen as a learning opportunity. Brainstorming sessions become exercises in caution rather than imagination. Ideas are filtered before they even leave someone's mind because the cost of being wrong feels too high. The most talented individuals, those who might otherwise drive breakthroughs, often leave or disengage quietly. The organization may appear efficient, but it is slowly losing its capacity to adapt, to innovate, and to grow in meaningful ways. Long-term strength is perhaps the most critical casualty of fear-based systems. Short-term performance can be measured easily in numbers, but the metrics that define sustainability, resilience, collaboration, and alignment cannot be built on anxiety. Organizations and teams shaped by fear are brittle. When a crisis occurs, when the environment changes, or when challenges arise that cannot be solved by rules and coercion alone, these organizations struggle. People do not communicate openly, they do not share knowledge, and they do not go beyond the minimum. Fear produces a false sense of efficiency, but erodes the structural integrity that makes long-term success possible. What is achieved today is likely to be lost tomorrow because it was built on compliance rather than commitment. Fear also affects the broader culture beyond the immediate team. When people experience fear as a motivator, they often reproduce it with those they manage, perpetuating a cycle. A leader who uses fear may think it is a temporary measure, but it becomes part of the organizational DNA. Teams become defensive, politics dominate decision-making, and relationships fracture. Trust is lost, communication becomes guarded, and collaboration suffers. People stop sharing bad news or challenges because doing so could expose them to blame. Without honest dialogue, problems fester and decisions are made on incomplete information, further weakening the organization. The irony of fear-based leadership is that it attempts to control what it cannot control: human behavior. People are not programmable machines. They respond to conditions and cues. Fear may get bodies in seats and hands on tasks, but it does not create engagement, inspiration, or loyalty. Over time, it motivates avoidance rather than initiative. People follow the path of least resistance rather than the path that would truly advance the organization's mission. They calculate, hide, and protect themselves, and in doing so, they protect their work from full potential and creativity. The alternative to fear is trust. Trust is not weakness, naivety, or permissiveness. Trust requires courage, consistency, and integrity. It requires leaders to put the well-being of their people alongside the well-being of the business. Trust allows people to take risks without fear of reprisal, to innovate without constant second-guessing, and to engage fully because they know they are seen and valued. Where fear suppresses, trust liberates. Where fear drives survival, trust drives contribution. People will take initiative, share ideas, and support one another not because they must, but because they choose to. Leaders who choose trust over fear also build resilience into their organizations. People are more willing to stay during challenging times when they feel supported. Teams solve problems collectively, share knowledge freely, and sustain effort over the long term because their commitment is intrinsic. Loyalty emerges naturally, not as a calculated response to pressure. Creativity flourishes because people feel safe enough to explore, experiment, and fail forward. The organization becomes adaptive, innovative, and enduring because it is built on principles that align human motivation with purpose rather than fear. Great leadership is service, protecting people, building trust, and thinking beyond immediate outcomes. Leadership is often misunderstood as a position of authority, as a role defined by titles, decision-making power, or control over resources. Yet the most enduring and effective leaders have always understood that authority is a byproduct of service, not the other way around. True leadership is measured not by how much control one exerts, but by how much one protects and empowers the people under one's care. Leaders who serve recognize that the responsibility entrusted to them is a privilege, and that privilege comes with it. Obligation to create environments where individuals can thrive, grow, and contribute fully. Protection in this context does not mean shielding people from challenges or preventing accountability. Rather, it means creating an environment in which people feel safe to take risks, make mistakes, and innovate without fear of retribution. Protecting people is about removing unnecessary obstacles, providing clear guidance, and defending them from policies, practices, or behaviors that compromise their well-being. It is about understanding that people are not interchangeable cogs in a machine, but human beings with aspirations, vulnerabilities, and the capacity for extraordinary contribution when treated with dignity and care. When leaders act as protectors, they cultivate trust, the single most important currency in any organization, because people begin to believe that their effort, their voice, and their commitment are valued rather than exploited. Trust, once established, becomes self-reinforcing. Leaders who consistently act with integrity, who follow through on promises, and who place the interests of their People alongside organizational goals create a culture where individuals feel safe to invest emotionally and intellectually in their work. Trust is fragile and cannot be manufactured through slogans, policies, or temporary incentives. It is earned over time through consistency, transparency, and empathy. A leader who embodies service recognizes that every interaction is an opportunity to build or erode trust, and that trust enables people to perform at their best. When trust is absent, people become guarded, defensive, and hesitant, which undermines collaboration, innovation, and resilience. Thinking beyond immediate outcomes is another hallmark of service-oriented leadership. The temptation in leadership is often to prioritize short-term metrics, quarterly results, or visible achievements that can be quantified and celebrated quickly. While such measures are important for operational success, they are insufficient for creating sustainable impact. Leaders who think beyond immediate outcomes consider the long-term health of their people, the durability of their teams, and the alignment of their organization's mission with broader societal goals. They recognize that decisions made today will ripple into the future, influencing trust, engagement, and culture for years to come. Service-minded leaders do not sacrifice people for results. Instead, they cultivate conditions in which long-term results emerge naturally from the care and investment they make in human potential. Service also requires humility. A leader who serves understands that their role is not to accumulate personal power or prestige, but to enable others to succeed. This mindset transforms the dynamic of authority from a top-down directive to a collaborative partnership. Leaders who approach their work in this way are more likely to listen actively, to mentor, and to facilitate the growth of those around them. They do not demand blind loyalty. They earn commitment through example, guidance, and support. By prioritizing service over status, they foster a culture where people are motivated by purpose rather than fear, innovation rather than compliance, and contribution rather than obligation. Furthermore, service-oriented leadership has societal implications. Organizations led by people who prioritize service contribute to stronger communities, healthier workplaces, and more resilient economies. When leaders protect their people, build trust, and think beyond immediate gains, they model behaviors that extend beyond the office. Their actions influence peers, shape culture, and inspire others to lead in service as well. The ripple effect of this approach is profound. It transforms not only organizations, but the broader systems in which they operate. Employees feel empowered to act ethically, creatively, and collaboratively, which ultimately elevates organizational performance and social impact simultaneously. In practice, service-oriented leadership manifests in both small and large actions. It is providing clarity during uncertainty, offering support during setbacks, recognizing effort rather than just outcomes, and making decisions that balance immediate pressures with long-term health. It is about creating policies that consider human needs, designing work systems that respect capacity, and fostering cultures where inclusion, fairness, and empathy are prioritized. These actions signal to people that they are more than resources, they are partners in a shared mission. By serving others, leaders unlock engagement, innovation, and loyalty in ways that no directive or incentive could ever achieve. Ultimately, the principle is simple yet powerful. Leaders exist to serve, not to be served. When leadership is grounded in service, organizations become resilient, people become inspired, and work becomes meaningful. Service-oriented leadership is not about weakness or passivity. It is about courage, foresight, and the disciplined choice to prioritize humanity over expedience. It recognizes that results are a consequence of well-being, alignment, and trust, not merely control or coercion. Leaders who embrace service protect people, cultivate trust, and act with a long-term perspective, creating conditions where individuals, teams, and organizations can thrive simultaneously. Organizations and societies thrive when they start with why and commit to human-centered, long-term impact. At the core of this idea is a recognition that people are not motivated solely by incentives, rewards, or fear. Human beings are inspired by purpose, connection, and the sense that their effort contributes to something meaningful beyond themselves. Organizations that operate without a clearly articulated why, without a reason for existence that transcends profits, metrics, or short-term gains, risk creating systems that function efficiently on paper but fail to engage the hearts and minds of those within them. Purpose is not a slogan, it is a compass. It provides clarity in ambiguity, alignment in complexity, and motivation when challenges are unavoidable. Starting with why is about clarity of intention. It requires leaders to understand deeply and communicate transparently why their organization exists, what it seeks to achieve, and how it envisions creating value for people and communities. This clarity is transformative. because it aligns action with belief. People are willing to invest extraordinary effort when they understand the meaning behind their work and see that it connects to a broader mission. Without this alignment, even the most talented individuals may drift, disengage, or act in ways that serve short-term objectives but undermine long-term sustainability. When the why is absent, organizations become reactive, chasing immediate wins while losing sight of what truly matters, and society absorbs the cost in inequality, burnout, and wasted potential. Human-centered impact is the natural extension of starting with why. It emphasizes that organizations exist not to serve themselves, but to serve people. This requires empathy, respect, and understanding of human needs at every level, from employees to customers, from local communities to global stakeholders. Human-centered approaches consider how policies, processes, and decisions affect real people, not just outcomes on a spreadsheet. They challenge the conventional view that efficiency and profitability must come at the expense of well-being or ethics. Instead, they demonstrate that prioritizing people can drive performance, loyalty, and innovation far more effectively than fear, coercion, or narrow financial incentive ever could. Long-term thinking is inseparable from purpose and human-centered design. It acknowledges that sustainable success cannot be measured solely by quarterly reports or immediate metrics. Leaders who commit to the long term consider the consequences of their actions on future employees, communities, and the systems they operate within. They invest in development, trust, and resilience, recognizing that short-term expediency often erodes the foundation required for enduring impact. This mindset changes the way decisions are made, encouraging patience, foresight, and courage. It is easier to prioritize quick results and immediate gains, but long-term thinking requires leaders to act with integrity even when the payoff is distant or uncertain. It asks them to resist the temptation of shortcuts and to design organizations that can thrive over decades rather than quarters. The combination of why, human-centered focus, and long-term perspective creates environments where people are motivated, engaged, and committed. When individuals understand the purpose of their work, feel that their well-being matters, and trust that leadership is oriented toward sustainable impact, engagement deepens. Collaboration flourishes because people are not competing for survival or recognition, but working toward a shared mission. Creativity emerges because people feel safe to take risks, challenge assumptions, and contribute ideas. Communities benefit because organizations act with responsibility, accountability, and awareness of broader consequences rather than exploiting short-term advantage at the expense of societal health. Conversely, organizations that neglect these principles often face decline despite outward appearances of success. They may deliver high output, achieve impressive metrics, or dominate markets, but the human cost accumulates invisibly. Employee turnover rises, morale declines, trust erodes, and innovation stagnates. Societies suffer as systems reward extraction, exploitation, and short-term thinking over contribution, fairness, and sustainable growth. The lack of a clear why, the absence of human-centered decision-making, and the focus on immediate results create environments that are efficient yet fragile, productive yet unsustainable, and superficially strong, yet internally weakened. Leadership plays a pivotal role in shaping whether organizations commit to these principles. Leaders who start with why model the importance of purpose and demonstrate the courage to align actions with core values. They listen to people, invest in relationships, and make decisions with an awareness of the human impact. They foster cultures where trust, safety, and psychological security are prioritized, understanding that people perform best when they feel valued, protected, and empowered. They act as stewards rather than commanders, building organizations that can endure and adapt, rather than simply chase short-term wins. Ultimately, thriving organizations and societies emerge when clarity of purpose drives every decision, when people are treated as ends rather than means, and when the horizon extends beyond immediate gains. Starting with why inspires commitment. Human-centered design fosters engagement and innovation, and long-term thinking ensures sustainability. These principles are mutually reinforcing, creating a cycle where purpose, care, and foresight cultivate trust, loyalty, and resilience. When implemented consistently, they transform organizations from transactional structures into living systems capable of generating impact that lasts across generations. When we step back and look at the patterns that define modern work and leadership, one truth becomes undeniable. People don't leave jobs, they leave environments that fail to protect them, inspire them, or connect them to a greater purpose. Fear may yield temporary results. Burnout signals systemic failure. And disengagement is a warning that our leadership has lost its way. But the solution has always been within reach. Clarity of why, service-driven leadership, human-centered design, and long-term thinking. When leaders protect people, build trust, and act with courage and integrity, they create environments where loyalty, creativity, and resilience thrive. When organizations start with purpose and commit to impact that goes beyond immediate outcomes, they unlock potential that no metric, incentive, or fear can produce. The call to action is clear. As individuals, as leaders, and as communities, we must choose to lead with empathy, to serve something bigger than ourselves, and to build systems and cultures worthy of human commitment. Because when we do, people stay, they grow. And together we create a future that truly matters.